It's really interesting how the materials play a role in all this too. So this is Jerel McCants, everybody. You are the architect of record on the Tampa Union Station. What are you calling it? Like a rehab project,
Yeah,
restoration.
yeah, improvements to Tampa Union Station.
And you
Yep.
are also on the job of the Jackson House, restoring the Jackson
Right.
House,
Yep.
which
Restoration.
we'll dig into both those
Yeah.
projects today,
Yep.
among other things in the private sector, right? I
Yeah.
think you've worked on fire stations,
Hmm.
commercial buildings,
Right.
any homes, like single
Yeah.
family homes,
Yeah. Yeah.
all
We
the
do a lot
above.
of single family homes. We don't advertise as much, but it's actually my favorite building type. But it's the most complex because obviously it's a resource. Once you're one and done, you're kind of just finished.
Yeah.
But they're the only building type that you can live, work, and play within, right? So you can't really sleep in your office or in a school building. It only has that one purpose. But houses can be everything. So it's like it's more versatile,
Mm.
but it's not like as replenishable as other projects.
That's why it's your favorite though, because you can do so much in a home where
Yeah, then
you're
it
kind
kind
of
of
looking at it from all these different angles.
and it gives more of an identity, right, based on the user.
Right.
So you're designing something custom for that person, and you don't want to make it too custom where nobody else likes it. So you still put a little bit of yourself into it and understand the long term meaning of what a home is.
Yeah, people make
Yeah,
that mistake when they design a home is they design it too much for
yeah,
themselves, and then when they go to sell it, they have a
right,
resale issue
right,
because
right,
that's their home. It's not everyone's
right.
home,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. They
So
might have like
building
three
it,
sinks or something. It's
yes,
like I don't want three
exactly.
sinks. Yeah,
And you are also the author of this book, Architecture of Segregation, which I
right.
definitely want to talk about today.
Sure.
And you go through basically the history of architecture, how spaces and places and design can be inviting to people
Right.
or be closed off from the
Inhibit.
community.
Right. Right. And that came from stories my dad told me as a child when we would take those trips to see our grandparents, and he would drive past places and say, "Hey, this is why I would go to the hospital if I was sick or go to the doctor's office." And he had to mention how he would have to go through the back, and then wait for all the white patients to be seen before he could be seen. And so for me, thinking spatially as a child, I'm like, well, how did that work? Did they have two separate waiting rooms? Did they have two
Right.
separate staff? And then that kind of led into me wanting to explore, how spaces were created. Then it led to my traveling and stuff later, much later, like I went through college and studied abroad and stuff. So then understanding different cultures,
Right.
and that began to like still see and hearken into those same notions of building spaces and how they could be inclusive and exclusive.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and your dad grew up in Alabama.
Right.
So
Right. Small
Alabama,
town.
and
Yeah.
you said you were born in Alabama, but you guys moved to
Well, I was born in,
Chattanooga
in Tennessee.
in
Yeah.
Tennessee.
Yeah.
Got it.
But
Family
we
moved to
we would just
Tennessee.
travel there a lot and see his, our family and stuff. And it was like, small. It was pretty much a town of like free slaves and Cherokee nation that was a community that was there. So they had their own kind of community within a community.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, and then architecture too, like the design and streetscapes, you kind of notice, at least I've noticed in the early 2000s,
Hmm.
streetscapes were built completely differently. I was in
Right.
Encore
Yeah.
2 days ago, and I was the only person out on one of the streets there.
Yeah.
And when you
Yeah.
look at the project itself and what it accomplishes in terms of the number of units and affordable housing and the beautiful park that's there, it's all
Hmm.
great things on paper. But
Hmm.
then in practice, when you're on the street,
Yeah.
it feels different
Right.
than Water Street's a bad example because then you're comparing ultra high end development to in affordable and workforce
Right.
housing, mixed income development. That's hard to compare. But
Hmm.
the only reason I'm comparing it is just simply the streetscape. The activity along the street and the
Right.
storefronts
Right.
and all of that sort of stuff. And you can walk by some of those newer buildings that were built in the
Hmm.
2000s that have those concrete walls all the way down
Yeah.
each street. And you
Yeah.
go, that's not built for people,
Yeah.
man. That's, and it's no wonder why no one's walking down the street because there's
Hmm.
nothing to do. And that's
Right.
not all Encore, obviously. And there's actually some great projects coming to Encore.
Yep.
The new apartment building Dr.
Hmm.
Patel's doing.
Hmm.
You got that hotel coming up,
Right.
grocery store. Like
Right.
it'll feel the
We,
way it was always meant to feel probably in the next 5 years.
yeah. It'll be
But
more
but it
activated.
it makes me think about your book in
Mm-hmm.
this kind of theory or this idea where a place can be designed, a
Mm-hmm.
streetscape can be designed to feel
Right.
like exclusive of people. Like I'm not supposed to be here. There's no restaurant. It's just concrete.
Right. Right. And that's kind of what you see when you're having planners or those thoughts come to paper. Like, okay, you're thinking about the area that it's in, right? Then you're thinking about who's going to occupy the area. Then you're going to design for maximum efficiency, but you're not really thinking about community, right? So that is where old towns have been successful because they thought about community first, and we don't think about community first. We think about maximizing the use of the space, and then it becomes commoditized, right? So it's like when you're going down Water Street, obviously it's commercial spaces everywhere, and it's high end commercial spaces, not like it's a Walgreens or something you can
Sure.
walk in. You know, it's intentional. So they were intentionally targeting a market. That's why Water Street is, to me, it's not part of Tampa. It's something different. So if you go down like Tampa Street where Gaslight Park is, it's totally different if you go over to where Water Street is. And it's intentional because you're automatically signaling to people who belongs there and who doesn't, right? And then when
Mhm.
you look at Encore, where it was a community, then it was destroyed, and then during urban renewal, then they put up housing projects that was a deterioration, further deterioration of that neighborhood. So that was then destroyed and brought, and now we're doing this mixed low-rise development, but it's still based on the same notion of functionality and not building community. That's why you're walking down those spaces and you're just like, okay, at 5 o'clock, I mean, you got like senior citizens upstairs, and there's not a lot of active spaces other than the park.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, let me
it's
just put
all, yeah.
here, let me show you the exact street. And
Hmm.
and I think gosh, it's almost like the end result on paper is at the forefront of design
Right.
and everything else, meaning we want to build 5,000 units.
Hmm.
That's the first goal, not,
Right.
well, what is the experience of the people that live here on the street level?
Right.
What does it feel like if I'm just walking through the neighborhood? It
Exactly.
seems like the goal is about those 5,000 and the sort of compatibility comes second, at
Right.
least.
Yep.
And you know what? I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking a lot about this too. And I actually did an episode um, with the Tampa Housing Authority,
Hmm.
and some of the explanation was really good. It's like, look, we need the units,
Hmm.
um, especially in the early 2000s. Creativity and walkability was not at the
Hmm.
forefront,
Right.
right? This
Right.
was a very suburban era.
Hmm.
And if you want urban development, this is how it makes sense economically to build it.
Right.
So it's like
Right.
maybe at the time, all that was well and good and made sense. It just seems like moving forward, there should be a little bit more of an emphasis on the actual experience.
Yeah, you're right, and it shouldn't be just about numbers, because when you do that, you're already taking your eye off the goal of creating a community, because you're gonna miss the main point when you're trying to squeeze in 5 or 10,000 units.
Yeah.
You know, you're never gonna create what's the intentionality, and communities grow organically. So even when you look at old cities in Europe and in parts of Africa and in the Middle East, they didn't start out with a master plan. Like, they grew organically,
Right.
and in some spaces are convenient and some aren't. So it's not based on a number or how many people you can squeeze in. It's based on what was the initial need, and then from there, the future needs can grow within it and still be sustainable and not grow on top of it or tear down and build something else. And that's how we are in America. Like, if a plot of land is there and there's a building on it, let's just tear it down and build something else on it.
Right.
In another 50 years, they're gonna tear it down and build something else on it. In
Yeah.
another 50 years. So it's like, that's not sustaining community, right? You're
No.
just building for immediate need. You're not building to be organic in nature and grow like the way old cities have done in the past.
Like Central Avenue. Central Avenue was a dense commercial area
Hmm.
that, you can actually go, David. So the street I was on was Harrison Street. If you just put the man in Encore up north, yeah, Harrison on the left side, Central and Harrison was the intersection I was at.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think, yeah, that was it. But you can just pop it on Harrison right there. And you can kind of see how dead that is on the left.
Hmm.
That's what I'm talking about.
Right.
Right. And even on the south side, the left hand side, these still felt closed off. Now
Hmm.
this is a newer building, and actually
Right.
the newer building, and it seems like human beings just culturally period today, and especially in America, there's this resurgence of urban areas, meaning
Hmm.
like downtown urban cores. People, that's where people
Hmm.
want to live.
Hmm.
And this is a newer building here, and you can see how much more pleasing this is to the eye and
Hmm.
much more pedestrian friendly this side of the street is. You've got access into the units. You've got those little front porches so people can kind of hang out.
Right.
And then on the north side, this was built, I think, earlier than that.
Hmm.
Now you've got a parking garage in here, and we should definitely talk about, you got to integrate parking. You
Yeah.
can't not have parking. So it's
Right.
like, design wise, putting a parking garage in a structure
Yeah.
and having that storefront walkability, wide sidewalk, that's kind of hard to,
Yeah. It's more of a challenge.
that's Tetris you're playing
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah. Because then you gotta go through all your codes and your zoning ordinances about how many parking spaces are allowed, and that actually becomes a deterrent when you're trying to create nice human scale walkable streets, is because you got to deal with regulatory agencies that says, oh, you need two
Right.
spaces per unit. It's like, do you really need two spaces per unit? Like, everybody doesn't need two cars, and it's like, it sometimes they can be not flexible, inflexible, and there should be areas where it could be left to create the common goal. That this common goal is to reactivate the street setting and to reimagine or re-envision what spaces used to be. Obviously everybody didn't have a car,
Hmm.
so you can't really build. If you're going to build 5,000 units, you can't have 10,000 cars.
Right.
So it's like you got to work around that. And sometimes, we as architects get kind of put in a place where we have to kind of satisfy the regulatory agency in order to get stuff through.
It seems like to me, like doing this show and talking with all these different developers, it almost seems like there's so much outside pressure from the private institutions, even
Hmm.
before you get to the codes, meaning
Hmm.
like the bank's not going to loan you the money for the project if you don't have the proper parking, right? The
Hmm.
brokers who are leasing up your building are going to tell you that you don't have enough parking.
Yeah.
Your development partners are going to say, this is risky as hell if we don't provide the parking. Your buyer pool or your tenant
Hmm.
pool, your businesses that are
Right.
going to come enjoy the unit, they're going to be like, well, I need parking, right? So it's like
Hmm.
you have all these factors that are putting pressure on the developer to provide the parking.
Right.
Do you need the government to also say you have to have the parking? It's like if you let that kind of private
Yeah.
market solve for itself,
Hmm.
it's not like tomorrow you're going to see buildings being built with zero parking. You might in the right place where the
Hmm.
demand makes sense, but you've got these natural like safety guards around parking
Yeah.
in the private sector that would exist whether or not the government has parking codes in place.
Yeah. Yeah. And because you want to be able to market the space, right? So developers are going to obviously want their bottom line to be as plush as plentiful as possible. But what you have to do as well is to guide them and show them that there's options that it could still be marketable without meeting some of those metrics. So we can be creative and try to achieve those goals where they can still make their bottom line and then still appease the regulatory agency. But it takes a little bit more work to do that and a little more creativity,
Hmm.
and it may be longer. But the end result, if the developer is interested in that, then it could be something that could be achieved. Because and that's what I try to do when I meet with developers, is gotta say, hey, like, buildings are more than just buildings and cars. You got to be able to if you want to do it right and create a good name for yourself and be marketable, like, do something that's special that people are going to really enjoy. It's
Hmm.
going to have more of a permanence to it instead of just meeting the check boxes.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you think that could be achieved? These are different. We're kind of like with these housing authority projects and these city projects, they're such an amazing opportunity because rarely do you have 40 acres, 50,
Hmm.
60 acres to
Hmm.
play with. I mean, Encore, when we were talking about it on the show with the housing authority, it's like, man, they could have done an Olympic Village there. There's a lot they could have done.
Right.
Um, Not to say that you don't need the affordable housing, because you certainly do. But I want to ask you, like, for these projects that where it's mixed income housing, how do you combine both worlds, right? You need to get the units in there. You need the
Hmm.
density. You need it
Hmm.
to be affordable and economical to build. You can't build Water Street, and
Yeah. Right.
um, but you also don't want to build these kind of what you were alluding to earlier, where, how do I say this? It's almost like the modern iteration of what was here before
Mm-hmm.
in terms of design
Yeah.
versus what Central Avenue was 100 years ago, where it's this dense commercial corridor, probably hundreds of different businesses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whereas this is we used the word Disney World earlier
Yeah. Yeah.
offline, but
Yeah.
I think you
Yeah.
kind of get what I'm
Mm-hmm.
sort of saying
Right.
here is like, how do you blend both those things together?
And it's a challenge. Yeah. And what I believe is that like the goal shouldn't be on the numbers. It should be on creating viable spaces. And we actually are working on some other projects with the Housing Authority right now where we're taking that scale down and not doing mid rises. We're doing like what was there in the 20s where they had
Ah,
quads units, they might have had triplexes, and multiple families living in one structure, but you didn't have one big building that was like just 100 feet long.
yeah.
So when you create more of a human scale, and that will be more inviting, people will want to tend to gather in those spaces in between buildings, and then that's when you get more activity. But you're not going to get a lot of activity when you're trying to build a community and you don't have any destination. So when you look at structures that are tight to each other, like downtown cores,
Right.
they're actually going somewhere, but they're passing and they're interacting with spaces along the way. But when you go to isolated areas, and Encore is it's a good development, but it it could be better if it had these destinations there. I mean, it has a nice park there
Hmm.
that's activated at times, but when it's not activated, there's not a lot of movement. So if you reduce the scale and not have those 5-story buildings and then just go with those quads, and they could be 2 stories, they could even be 3 stories, but then you could have efficiency units that are more affordable, like 1 and 2 bedroom units, and they could be all in a smaller building footprint. Then you can begin to break up the scale and still get a high density amount of people, because we're not dealing with lots that are like the standard 50 by 100.
Isn't it much more expensive to do that rather than what
Yeah.
we're looking at here, just that single block building?
Well, it is kind of a trade-off. So when you're doing these big buildings, you got to worry about a lot more engineering costs. You got a lot. You got to deal with the commercial building code that has a lot more criteria to it. So you got to do with fire suppression systems. You got
Ah,
to deal with all these
right.
extra nuances and caveats you got to throw into the building in order to make it code compliant. But when you're dealing with smaller units, duplexes and triplexes, and you're dealing with the residential code and then maybe parts of the commercial code, which is like two separate codes that kind of overlap, you can still build and be efficient, and it won't necessarily be more costly than doing a 5-story building.
Mm.
You're not going to have an amount of people there, but you'll still have something that's going to be more of an activated space, and that's going to be the intention of the developer, or or the authority, if that's what they want to do. And I know that you want to have parking and have enough people, but you're either going to have, you can't kind of trade off volume per community in my mind. So you
Yeah.
got to have one or the other.
Yeah, and so you're what you're advocating for is essentially quality over quantity.
Yeah.
You know, on a particular block, you could have less units, but the
Hmm.
quality would be way, way higher.
Right.
The
Right.
lifestyle, the connectivity. Like zoom out, David, just give me the aerial of this building right here. These buildings, we've got them in my neighborhood all
Hmm.
the way down in South Tampa. You see them all the way out in Riverview.
Hmm.
You see them right here in the urban core.
Yeah.
And they're these single block buildings that America, and this isn't just Tampa, this is like our country as a whole, has kind of just become the standard apartment, right?
Hmm.
The
Yeah.
standard apartment building. And it doesn't necessarily foster and breed a better community
Right.
rather than that kind of 1920s
Hmm.
you mentioned, that
Hmm.
kind of old way of life where everyone's deeply connected. You got the corner stores, you got
Right.
people interacting on the street. These single block buildings are like you're kind of locked in your, I mean, I've lived in a bunch of them.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
you're kind of locked in your own unit. You might have a little balcony, maybe not if you're
Right.
lucky, right? You've got the pool amenities, which a lot
Right.
of people enjoy. You got the little gym and stuff like that, but otherwise you're ordering Amazon, you're
Right.
kind of cooking in your little kitchen, and
It,
there's not this like deep level of community engagement and togetherness that there is in some of these older neighborhoods.
Hmm.
And when you look at the older pictures of American
Yeah.
cities, there's so much more. People are so much more engaged and connected with each other. You even
Right.
can see it in the voting turnout. Like the voting turnout back then is like 80%.
Mm. Mm.
I've kind of said a bunch of times on the show, I think it's because we're face to face, man. We're on the street. We
Yeah.
can't ignore each other.
Yeah.
Like you're buying hardware from me. I'm buying
Right.
my groceries from you. Like we all have a vested interest in our community.
And I'm glad you mentioned it. Yeah. And another thing that happens when you do these masses of buildings and they are priced at a certain area that people can afford,
Yes.
now you're separating parts of society. So you got your units that are affordable, but you're not going to have your higher end people, and they may have different political ideologies and notions about living. But when you break down the scale and people from mixed backgrounds can be to talk to each other, that reinforces community. But then when you're dealing with buildings that are like these houses are started at 200,000 and these other houses start at 1 million, you're already creating a separation based on social economic conditions. Then it keeps people in their bubbles and it creates that stratification, right?
Right.
And that's kind of stuff I mentioned in the book, but that's kind of what is kind of a plus minus with these. You're maximizing the amount of people there, but you're not reinforcing community. People don't have a sense of ownership. You're already putting groups of people that are together within a certain social economic level, and they're not being able to interact with each other like you were mentioning. So that's kind of an issue when you're dealing with developments, the development patterns that we're doing right now.
Yeah, and then one of the things that was mentioned on the episode with the housing authority is required by law, they are to replace or exceed the amount of units that were on the
Yeah.
given property that they're
Hmm.
redeveloping.
Yeah.
And so I would imagine, David, can you go back and remember you could see like the historic view of the Encore district, when you could actually see these housing projects
Hmm.
and the level of density that they had to replace.
Hmm.
I mean, these people were look at this. These
Yeah.
people are totally packed in here.
Yeah.
Now, these look like townhouse style or quads, which I believe they were.
Yeah, they're kind of like row houses, but they're like 1 or 2 stories, and they're kind of almost like military barracks. If you look at Robles Park, they were kind of like Robles Park,
Right.
and they're pretty depressing. Like that's kind of the time I came down here to Tampa to go to school, and I drove through this neighborhood one night, and it was scary. it was
Yeah.
it was not a welcoming place. It was very foreboding. The feel of it, the structures was just it was made just for like it was almost like a prison without walls. And I wanted to get out of there as fast as I could.
Man, they copy and pasted these all over the country though,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And here in the city too. This is Robles Park. This is what the West
Yeah.
River area, and there's still
Yeah.
a few more
Hmm.
remaining. This
Hmm.
is what where Gasworks is, where La Union is, in that new
Hmm.
building. Stevedore, right? Stevedore. Yeah, that's kind of what it was. And when they go in to redevelop it, they have to do the minimum
Hmm.
units that were already there. So I would imagine it brings with the density brings challenges. How
Yeah.
do we fit that many units on these parcels and
Right.
also keep a good design? And I think, for the time in 2009, 2010, maybe that was appropriate. Maybe
Right.
economically that's what made sense. But well, look at this old. What year are you looking at, David? This is crazy. This
Yeah.
aerial, 2007.
Yeah, that's probably about the time.
Look at the amount. Look at the dead space downtown.
Yeah.
People
Oh
think
yeah.
we have empty parking lots
Oh
now.
yeah.
People think there's too many asphalt parking lots all over the urban core. Look at this image of Tampa. We've came
Especially
so
Channel
far
Side.
already. Channel side,
It's
man.
just
Look at that.
warehouses.
That's so
abandoned
crazy.
warehouses.
So it's like we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
So then how do you go all the way to the future, go back to Encore? So how do you continue to build not only Encore, but other projects where you do have to account for workforce housing, for affordable housing, you need the minimum number of units. How do you build that in a way that's more approachable for people?
Yeah, it's a challenge because you want to be able to be everything and then have enough units available, but that once you reduce the units, then the surge of the availability goes up, right? Because you'll have less units. Then it makes it the price might jump up if there's not a price fix on it. So then when you're creating some of these spaces that are low density, it's more desirable, but then the cost is higher. So now you're automatically moving, one category of people to another and not creating that mixed community that you really want to have or intended to have. So it's a juggling act. You may have to have some buildings that are density and then some buildings is low scale and then step back up. So then when you get into urban planning, that's kind of what you need to do. Instead of having 8 buildings that are all 5 or 6 stories, maybe you have 2 buildings, 5, 6 stories. Then you can step the scale down and have a couple of quads, maybe even some 6-plex units. Then you can go back up. We're actually finishing a project in East Tampa that has each unit has 6. Each building has 6 units, and there's 4 buildings, but we spaced them on the site where when you drive into it, it has a lot of open space, green space. You have green space in the front and in the back, and they're separated. So and it will create more of a sense of ownership. Even though they're apartment buildings, people could still have a little more sense of pride of where they're living. So they didn't go for they could have put a big 7-story building right there and put in 2,000 people.
Right.
So, but they didn't want to do that. So you gotta have to have the intention of, or you want to create the community and then drop the scale down. Everybody wants to live close to the city. You should have some workforce housing, but then you should have it in a way that's going to be display more of a sense of ownership and have that scale that I said, break up the scale, have a couple of big buildings, maybe on the anchor corners, but then as you go into it, it could be designed a way where it's opened up. Even those green spaces in there, I think they're planned to be buildings in those spaces in the future. So, but then when you walk down that street, if you don't have that destination I mentioned, or even the interaction between one building to another where they respond and feed off each other, it's gonna be like a chasm. You're gonna want to bike and walk through there as fast as you can because it's not.
Yeah,
inviting,
that's how it felt, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's what's really weird though is it's still beautiful. The park is nice. The streets are clean.
Yeah.
The landscaping is on point. Very well maintained. The roads are newer. The roads are smooth. The sidewalks are smooth. But there's something off.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's something off.
You're right. Yeah. And it's because they plan for numbers and not for sustaining or creating a community. And so people, like you said, they don't know each other. They're in a box. They're separated because they're 6 feet above the ground, 6 to 7 stories above the ground, and they may know the people right next to them, but they may not know people on the first floor.
Yeah.
So then there's the activities where people can get to meet each other and stuff, but it's it's still missing something because it's not natural. It's not innate to
right.
for humans to kind of live in these boxes.
Yeah.
Yes. At least in America, that's not. It doesn't reinforce notions of ownership or connectedness. It's missing.
Yeah, and we're not even talking Encore. I mean, this is applicable to a lot of different projects. And I've tried to articulate this. It's kind of I'm glad you're on the show today to help me articulate this because it's hard to say. It's well, what's wrong with it? Well, the park is nice. The sidewalks, I mean, look, it's got the pavers.
Right.
There's everything on paper points to this is awesome, but it's still dead. And I've talked about actually Miami, Brickell. When you look at the skyline of Miami, you would expect that, well, when I go in the middle of that, it's going to be like Chicago. It's going to be like New York.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah. Right.
It's a lot of this. It's a lot of Disney World. It's a lot of 20-story parking garages with maybe some retail on the ground floor. And so what you get really isn't a streetscape for people. It's just basically suburban condo buildings where you could build all the way out on the beach.
Yeah.
Or all the way in Brickell. It's it's the same building with the same footprint.
Right.
But then you go to a place like Chicago, New York, Boston, and the streetscape is completely different.
Right.
The streetscape is exclusively for people. Every piece of it's activated. Coffee shop, bakery, this person, the bodega, all of it. Yeah. And it seems like if we could mix those two worlds, it would be the best way to grow and develop this city or really any American city.
Right. And it's the reason why they're trying to take lessons learned from those older cities in America and try to put what's called new urbanism design into creating these new spaces. That's why you might see the wider sidewalks and the streets that are like, broken down where it's not bi-directional, it's one-way streets, it's side street parking. They're trying to create something based on lessons learned from those older communities, but it's still a little bit of that like fake. It's like you can't put a puzzle together like here it is, like it like I said, it has to grow organically.
Yeah.
Those beautiful cities in Chicago and New York, they didn't start out that way. They started out with a block, and then there was a replication to it, but they still had their different different personality to them. Each block had a little bit of different personality. You can walk, especially in New York. Of course, there's a store on every corner.
Sure.
Right, and it's like you don't have that here. So they're trying to maximize people parking, and they're trying to put everything in this jumbo pot mixed around and pour it out, and like here it is, you bake it, and then you have this finished product, and it's sterile, right? Because you're not planning for that rhythm, that organicness where people are going to create their own pathways. They're kind of telling you where to walk, where you can't walk, or where to sit, where you can't sit, and what the spaces are gonna be, without having the flexibility of having those spaces change. So you've got these storefront glazing and stuff in here. Nobody's gonna take that out and put it like a different area in there, but it should be more adaptable, right? And then it gives a little bit more character, and then the buildings take on their own identity. So they're trying to they bake the cake and it's there. You can't change it.
Baking the cake is the perfect analogy because I have 100 grams of sugar.
Yeah.
I have the butter. I have the flat. Like I have everything I need. The ingredients are all measured and perfect. What's wrong with the cake?
Right. Not like
right?
grandma used to make it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like there's something off about the cake.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting. So you would say that making the ground floor at least more adaptable would be one example of a way you could improve these large projects.
Right. Yeah. And we worked on some shell spaces in there to kind of activate those kind of, they call gray boxes, where they're built for a future tenant, but then we have to work within the confines of that space. So what if like they didn't want all that space? What if they wanted 50% of that space? So then if the original architect didn't plan for the doors or whatever, or plan for the adaptability, that corner of that space is useless. So they have to go with a tenant that is going to take up that whole space. So you're already creating this force, like just square peg in a round hole kind of thing. It's like you got to keep switching out till you get the right one.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have that organicness, where it's like, what if you have somebody that just wants to have a smoothie place or something, or they want to have like custom cupcake, something, but this is not made for it. It's made, you got a 2,000 square foot space, you got a 3,500 square foot space. Find a tenant.
This episode is brought to you by the official remodeler of the TBD podcast, Kohler House Remodeling Company. Built on the belief that every homeowner deserves a premium experience, Kohler House is redefining high-end home remodeling with their commitment to integrity, craftsmanship, and quality communication. Their work speaks for itself, from condos in the towers of Channelside to 100-year-old homes in South Tampa, creating spaces that are both stunning and functional. What sets Kohler House Remodeling Company apart is their dedication to not only transforming homes into beautiful spaces, but to elevating the standard of residential general contracting. From concept to completion, every detail is handled with care, ensuring a process that's as smooth as the results are impressive. To learn more, check out our partner's website at kohlerhouse.net, KOHLERHAUS.net. This episode is sponsored by Chansey Architecture and Interior Design. Rooted in the heart of Ybor City for over 35 years, Walt Chansey and his team are trailblazers in their field. Beyond their work across the United States and the Bahamas, Chansey has shaped some of the most iconic residential and commercial spaces that serve as gateways to Cigar City, including Casa Marti and Casa Gomez. What sets Chansey Design apart is their ability to preserve the soul and character of historic buildings while seamlessly integrating modern design and functionality. They blend tradition with innovation, creating spaces that honor the past while meeting today's needs. Check out their work at www.chanseydesign.com. America is so good at that. Like, we're our own worst enemy, where we take everything and standardize it and industrialize it and create a model that can be replicated a million times over.
Mm-hmm.
You could go to any city in America and find housing developments like this.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Mm-hmm.
just Tampa. It's not just Encore.
Right.
You know, it's like and frankly, it's not just the public-private partnerships with the housing authority or anything like that.
Yeah.
Even if you go to the suburbs, a completely private project will typically look something like this because it's the easiest,
Mm-hmm.
right? And usually the least expensive, the most economical way to build stuff like this.
Right.
Can we get to a place, because a lot of it comes down to funding. Like if you took a more ambitious project to a bank, the bank is going to be like, they're a little bit more weary. That's the problem too, is there's a lot of factors at play.
Right. Everybody's got their hand in the mix, and everybody wants things their way. And it kind of reminds me like what's going on in West River right now. And I think we spoke to Leroy, where that development along Main Street, it does have more commercial spaces in the ground plane than Encore does.
Sure.
But Main Street was a main street, right? It had more commercial density to it. So they are trying to put that back into some of those mid-rise units, and then they put the Publix on the corner that just opened up, which, you know, I'm kind of not a fan. I live in that neighborhood, but I don't think that's a perfect place to activate that corner. Then you got Blake High School across the street, but they're trying to make the space more active because they want to keep taking lessons from one development and put lessons learned and how can we create better spaces. So they are trying to do something different in West River that they didn't achieve or wanted to achieve in Encore.
Sure.
So they are learning, and it's taking some time to create, what's going to be right mix. Like you see where the parking garages aren't attached to buildings.
Ah.
You got green space in and around the front and the back, and they want to create these linkages. So we're actually trying to work with them to create more of an identity where if you're on one side of like on Rome, and you want to have some connection over to like Delaware or Willow, like how can we link it together to stitch them to make it feel like it's more of a community so people can interact outside of the buildings instead of just inside their box.
Yeah, it's all about that ground floor and the streetscape, right? I think that makes all the difference. And to your point about that Publix, yeah, it's basically faced the wrong way. We spent 30 minutes with Leroy on the show with the Housing Authority talking about it. And he did a fantastic job of really explaining why overall that it's the right call to get that in there. Look, it's a food desert. You got Publix, which is an operator is going to do a fantastic job for that community. They've done the design well. You got the brick, right? Kind of looks like old West Tampa.
Fake though, right?
I know
you
that was my whole
and
point.
You got the blackout windows.
I know, yeah. And I didn't combat him too much on it, just because at the end of the day, he's right, man. Like, look, we got to get a grocery store in there.
He is right.
If I'm in charge of the whole thing, we're not building it like that.
Yeah.
And I think you would say the same.
Right.
But at the end of the day, Leroy's right. Look, we need a grocery store. Okay, you got Publix. Publix has their
brand,
formula that they like to do.
Right.
And you got the parking. At least the parking's not on Main Street.
Yeah.
It's got some. It's he explained it in a way that I could like swallow.
Yeah, he could appreciate
if that makes
it.
sense.
He could
yes.
appreciate it.
Yes.
But
it's
what?
great.
Like it's
this street here, Main Street.
right.
So David, zoom out a little bit and try to capture West River along with Howard Avenue. So Albany, Howard Avenue, right here. On the west side of the screen, which is the left-hand side, you can kind of see the density. This is old West Tampa. I call it like downtown West Tampa, right? So David, if you put the little man on Main and Howard, when you're walking, and even if you're in a car, the experience just in these 4 blocks is completely different. You've got a portion of the city that was developed in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Main and Howard is on the, it's further west, David. Then you've got West River, which was developed in only the last few years, a few more intersections over. On Main and Howard, you've got these smaller footprint buildings. And because they're smaller, you have more of a diversity of commercial uses.
Yes.
So you got the little Asian spot, you got the taco spot, you got the barbecue place, you got a co-work place. And then
Right.
The little city pocket park, Salsinas Park.
Yep.
By the way, look at
Salsinas.
that
Yep.
beautiful shiny new road we've got. I love all the infrastructure work
Yeah.
happening. Go
Yep.
turn around, David, and go east down Main Street right here. Take a right if it lets you. Go one more forward and then take a right.
Yeah.
See if that works.
Yep.
So let's see. This is a few years old.
Right.
See, so this is what it looked like. Now you can already see some infrastructure work being done. But even this view here, go back a few, David. Bring me back a little bit. Right here, right here. You can already see how much more approachable this will be. And this is maybe a year old, 2 years old.
Yeah, that's all built out now.
It's all built out now. And it's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
You walk down the
It's a
street,
good
it's
job.
great.
Yeah.
Like you got all these different uses. You got a barbecue spot that's been there forever that just renovated.
Right.
You got the co-work place, West Tampa Chamber of Commerce is in there. And it feels good, man. It feels authentic. It feels like a real city.
Yeah, and they got other built out spaces that's further down that's commercialized, and they have different events and stuff. So yeah, it's more activated.
I'm stoked because I really believe this little pocket right here, this neighborhood, this little downtown pocket of West Tampa, and then the neighborhood in general, man, I'm optimistic. It's got a bright future. There's a lot of exciting things happening in West Tampa, and West Tampa deserves its time to shine because for decades it was really neglected, and they haven't had roads repaired, and I mean, in my lifetime, certainly.
And it's funny.
It's been a while.
And that's where I am. You know, I actually live like a few blocks from here. So I saw the potential in it, you know, being as thinking in my mindset about spaces and places.
Yeah.
It has a potential, right? So that's what I do like about it is that it's becoming that, right? And you can see it transform while you're walking around and stuff. So it's getting to be that way. You know, the restaurants, more people are seeing it, catching on and moving in there and setting up shop. And you got a diversity of stuff. Like you're saying, you got an Asian restaurant, you got your Mexican restaurant, you got your
Barbecue
boutique
King
restaurant, the barbecue, you know, you got all these cafes and stuff. You got everything that's you know, wanting to get in here and make West Tampa something special like it, you know, originally was intended, you know, when it was founded.
So how long have you lived in West Tampa?
Oh man, it's been a while. It's been a minute. Like I think I've been there since I moved back to Tampa. Probably like 15 years.
So you've seen the whole
longer.
thing.
Yeah.
You've
I've
seen
seen
the
it
whole
like
thing.
this and before. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so what my hope would be is because the city owns and the housing authority owns so much land. I mean, you're probably talking about at least 100 acres of land.
Yeah.
Let's just say it's 100 acres.
Yeah.
That means you have an incredible opportunity to line up with what this used to be 100 years ago, right? And when you travel down Main Street, as you get to the newer development, again, it doesn't feel the same on the street.
Yeah.
But it looks like a better rendition of what they've been doing in the past housing developments for the past maybe 50 years or so. You can tell it's getting more refined.
Yeah.
And there's more of a dedication to the people actually living there versus the numbers.
And the aesthetics, and then like I said, it has more commercial spaces, so it's more human scale. When you're walking down there, it's more inviting. It's got more areas where you can meander and turn a corner and have these surprises, right? And we learn that it's a pattern language we learn in school about how taking lessons learned of old towns and try to incorporate them. So you want people to have experiences when they're walking, not just to see like walls for 100 feet. You want to open it up. That's what the beauty, like Savannah, like, you know, you're walking down there and these spaces in between buildings are these little beautifully refined courtyards. And sometimes you can go through them, sometimes they're private, but it was made that way on purpose for this discovery. And that's what you need to have. Even when you're walking down a dense urban fabric, you still need to have places of discovery. And you know, South Centers Park, and you got, West Tampa has the elements to have all that there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's what I like about it.
Yeah, me too. I think the potential is already sort of in the fabric of West Tampa. It's been there for 100 years. It just needs a dedication to it. Kind of see the market demand. You see how people interact. The problem is that's tough to do, and you've invested $500 million.
Right. Yeah. And they had things parceled out and platted.
Right.
So, but you know, there's still ways to accommodate it. Like what I've seen when I've worked on master plans, it can be something. You just have to have the foresight of somebody and that's where you get to urban planning. Like you You may have a plot that's 100 by 300. It doesn't mean to be that at least have one building there. It could be
Mm.
5 buildings, it could be 3 buildings, it could be 2 buildings. So that can change. But you just depends on how far you want to go with developing that community. And that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. It should be done in phases, and then over time, and like with economy of scale, and then market demands, things can change.
Right.
And then that's when how you would get back to some of those special places that you see in other cities that are much older.
Well, if you completely go against the history and build all these single block buildings, it actually kind of takes away from what used to be there. Like you brought up history earlier, where
Hmm.
there could be these sort of moments on a walk, like you kind of turn a corner and then there's a statue of somebody,
Hmm.
or an old mural of what this place used to look like. That's really important, man.
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean, we Americans know, go on a road trip. A lot of this shit looks the same.
Yeah.
You got the interstate with the exit, you got the Taco Bell and the
Yeah.
Flying J, and
Right.
like the
Very.
uniqueness of our city and our history is so important and kind of unique to Florida. Like we have an opportunity to grow and develop and
Hmm.
kind of bring those stories and bring that history and
Right.
culture along with us and have something totally unique to Florida. Like
Right.
people don't come to Florida for a history visit,
Yeah.
but they do go to Boston and New
Hmm.
York and Chicago. If we build out in a really intentional way and highlight some of the historic neighborhoods and the
Hmm.
features that we have,
Hmm.
but mix it with the modern growth and development, you literally could have people that, oh, let's go on a cruise. We're leaving from Tampa. Oh, let's stay an extra day and let's go to West Tampa
Yeah.
and see how this old neighborhood was. And
Exactly.
that stuff is important, man.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just turn into like Orlando, or I
Yeah.
don't know, you
Yeah.
name it, right?
Yeah.
Any Florida city.
And that's what when you look at the canvas of America, those are those special places. You go to New Orleans,
Yeah,
you
man.
know, you got to go to certain wards there, and you're not just going to go through there just to go to an event or go to a conference and leave. You're going to stay there and walk around the city. It's beautiful. Like I was in Kansas City a couple of weeks ago, Missouri, and I didn't know a lot of significant historic people that came out of Kansas City and the way the city was developed. It reminded me a little bit more of my hometown than obviously Florida, but it they have a story to tell, and it makes me want to go back just to hang out and have fun, because
Yeah,
it's it's got that element there, and Tampa can have that as well.
100%.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, it's always fascinating. Like I remember I went to New Orleans a couple times. The first time was on fraternity formal in college. So it was like
Mm-hmm.
Bourbon Street the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But even
Yeah.
when I was there, you'd look down these streets at these different neighborhoods and see the old architecture and
Hmm.
the streetcar going through in the park and these old buildings that
Right.
were built in the late 1700s. And you can't
Hmm.
ignore it.
Yeah. Yeah. They
You
got
can't ignore
above
it.
grade ground cemeteries, right? Because of
Yeah,
the,
because
the
it's
sea
so
level.
low there
Right.
that the bodies will start floating if they're on the ground. No, I
So
think
yeah.
I think yeah, the history component we have here has got to be brought forward, and so that brings me to what I wanted to talk about next, which is
Yeah.
your efforts at the Jackson House and
Hmm.
also Tampa Union Station.
Hmm.
Two of seriously in the top three. I mean, if you want to include a cigar factory in there, sure, but the most significant historic properties in the
Oh,
city, man.
wow. Oh man.
And you get to work on
Yeah.
both.
Wow. It made me feel like I'm a celebrity. Yeah.
Well,
I don't
listen,
know.
look, if
Yeah.
you do them the right way, you're a hero. I mean,
Well.
seriously, it's like all this talk about growth and development,
Hmm.
if we let these buildings slip and
Hmm.
crumble, which they've started to,
Yeah.
we lose what makes us amazing.
Hmm.
So let's talk about the
Yeah.
Jackson
Sure.
House first. So
Yeah.
Jackson House has had decades of neglect,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
years of trying to figure out between private entities in the city and the foundation, kind of how it all is going to work.
Hmm.
And the
Hmm.
most recent news is you have been selected to spearhead the project and be the architect of record.
Yeah. And it's a labor of love, right? And because I do want to wake up, and when I go to work, I want to have passion projects, things that have a purpose. It makes me self-fulfill my purpose and being an architect. So working with the foundation for several years, it's been a lot of endless like labor that I was just kind of donating because I wanted to see something happen, and it's more than just, transactional. Like you said, it has so much significance. It's got a very prestigious history to it. And, I wanted to be a part of it as any way I could. So I was wanting to, donate time and work with the foundation. And they've been really great with wanting to push this along. And we've had several meetings with the city and with property owners and with investors and people that wanted to see this vision come to fruition. I met one of the older descendant that back in, man, I moved to Tampa maybe 2007, Willie Robinson, and he at the time he gave me a tour of the house. It was still able to walk through it at that time, and it didn't have the canvas tarp on it like it does now. So he told me the whole history and significance of it. I was like, man, this is awesome. Like, how can I help? And he was working on getting it listed as a historic place at the time, and he did that. And unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago, and he's survived by some family members. He's got a daughter, and some foundation members that want to carry on his legacy of rebuilding the Jackson House. So yeah, I mean, it's a passion project with a purpose, and we created these renderings in order to, like, get more people motivated and to
Mm.
have other people invest into the vision. And we worked with other nonprofits. We worked with a history center, and they were going to do a set design on the inside. We wanted to not touch the building in a way that was, not telling a story. So what we did is the available space that the building didn't occupy on the site, recreated this atrium space to have a welcome area, so
Wow.
people can come up, and then we'll have like a ramp or a lift system that people can come in and go to the main floor level. So the main footprint of the house that it was when it was originally built and then added on, a couple of years later, won't be touched.
Right.
We're just working on the part that was already open to create that atrium space. We're not tearing down a part of the house to put that there.
Yeah, for people just listening, it's this all glass atrium,
Hmm.
which you kind of
Right.
see that in Europe, where you've got these like very old museums, and then there's a more contemporary part of it that's
Right.
all glass or metalwork, and it actually looks good.
Yeah. And
Like I don't think at all that piece, that atrium, takes away
mhm.
from the significance of the Jackson House, the actual
Right.
structure.
Thank you. Yeah.
It
That's
kind of complements it really,
right. And that's what
especially how you've
right.
stepped down the roof line and
Yeah, the
everything.
sensitivity, and that's what we want to do. We want to give the hierarchy to the existing building and only supplement it based on the needs that are going to be required for us to, to have that kind of space to make it a museum.
The gift shop. No, no.
Right.
What is it gonna be like? Is that the entrance, the
Well,
lobby?
yeah, it'll be an entrance, a lobby. It'll be a place where people can meet to start their tours.
Yeah.
So you don't want to walk into the front of the house where there were rooms and then have people cramped into a space and say, "Hey, this is where so and so lived." I want it to be an experience, a
Mhm.
journey. So that's another purpose of having this atrium space. So it people can get prepped and understand, have a little bit of preference before they go through the space and look at the exhibits. Because there are rooms that are very small in there. They aren't the contemporary rooms that we think of now, like 8 by 10 bedrooms. Some bedrooms are only like 6 feet wide,
Wow.
right? So they were just enough to put a bed in it, right? You sleep and you're out the next day. So they weren't built on our notions of what spaces are now. So I want to retain that as much as possible. So that is another reason why we wanted to have this gathering space
And what
in the
is the
back.
significance of the Jackson House? Can you tell people a little bit
Yeah,
about it?
yeah. The Jackson House was it was a rooming house that was built in the early 1900s, and it was primarily a place for people. Uh, uh, of course, it was during segregation, so it was open to people that weren't allowed to room in other hotels. So that would be like your minorities, your African Americans, your Indians, and Cubans, and Native Americans. Like they would board here, and then conduct their business, and then leave and go back to their destination. It was also a stop along the Chitlin circuit. So when the famous musicians would come a long train because everybody traveled by train at that time, right? And then stop at Tampa Union Station. They would walk to the Jackson House and stay there for a couple of days, do their performances, and some of them were in St. Petersburg, and they would come back to Tampa, and then stay at the Jackson House, and then leave through the train station. So you had your Cap Callaways and your Ray Charles and all these famous musicians would stay here, and have their place to relax and gather themselves before their shows. So it was significant in the point in that it's the last standing structure in the Tampa Bay and even St. Petersburg area that can harken back to that period of time.
And who stayed there?
Yeah, it was Ray Charles, Cap Calloway, a lot of other famous musicians that went through there. Of course, you had Cannonball Adderley. I think he actually a Florida native, Cannonball Adderley. So you had people that along in that whole duration of that from the 30s, 40s, 50s, that Cotton Club experience that was talked about up in Harlem. They would come down and do these shows along that what they call the Chitlin Circuit, and then they would perform at clubs. Some of them performed at the Armory over here. It's now like the JCC, and then they would actually perform at some other smaller venues, and then come back to the Jackson House.
And I read that there were a lot of clubs on Central Avenue that they would perform at, too.
Right. Yeah. And there were little shacks, like Shake Shacks, where people go in there, and there's wood frames that would probably vibrate with the music.
Can you imagine back then? Oh my gosh. All the different little commercial buildings, how close they were together.
Yeah.
You got to think about the energy at that time. All that live music, Ray Charles playing in some little club on Central Avenue. Like, whoa, how cool would that be?
Yeah, you walk in and you see somebody like you listen to, on your record, and then you come in there, it's like, that's where they are.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? The people that stayed at this place were like famous people that are now ingrained in American history and culture.
Yeah.
And they stayed right here. So
Yeah.
it's super significant. It's Tampa history, but really it's a piece of American history.
Exactly.
It's a big deal. And the fact that you're spearheading it and moving forward on it. We talked off air about, it has had challenges over the years, but it sounds like at this point you're moving forward on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the foundation, and finally it took several years of going back and forth and negotiating entitlements, and we finally got that cleared. And the city's been great with wanting to offset any type of other code requirements, because we do want to maintain a historic certification. We talked about earlier. They need to have that. They need to have a national historic certification, state and local historic certification. So we're working with the ARC in Tampa, the Architectural Review Commission, with this project to make sure that we are maintaining their requirements for historic structures. And then, so of course, it works its way back up. So that is a source for obviously for funding at different levels, and to maintain all those certifications. It just gives it more of a prestige, once it's finished, and people can come down and tour it and get a deeper history, even more of a deeper history than I know. Because when I walked through there with Mr. Robinson, USF had did a scan before some of the obviously structural issues happened. There's plaster walls where people have their handprints on it, and the signatures and stuff.
Whoa.
That was, so the house is living, breathing history, and the molds were saved. So we're going to try to put that back into the set design. With the set design, that's probably going to come from somebody at the History Center or something that's going to recreate those spaces and tell those stories. So I mean, you can imagine the house being there that long. I mean, it's all kind of stories in the walls and the floors and the ceilings and that we don't even know about. It's going to be displayed once it opens.
David, pull up a current picture, because my next question is, how do you go from what it is currently, which is falling apart? It's basically held up by looks like an internal skeleton of wood beams kind of supporting the structure.
Right.
look at the condition, man. So
Yes.
most people are familiar, but just so people understand, the Jackson House has been falling apart. Like
Right.
that bottom picture,
Yeah.
I don't was that current, David? I mean, I would say it's been
Yeah.
falling apart
Hmm.
for 20 years,
Yeah.
maybe longer. And so it's in a condition now where I just personally question, like, man, how do you turn that
Hmm.
into what that rendering is?
Hmm.
So what is sort of the game plan there?
Yeah. Yeah. And you can see the cross bracing on the inside where they have the X's. Those are like timber beams that were put in several years ago through a structural engineer. They donate some in-kind services, and the community's really been kind of helpful with trying to maintain the house. And so that endoskeleton has been supporting the house for several years, probably more than a decade, more than a decade.
Wow.
And you can see like other areas are falling down. What our plan is, we have a very good structural engineer that's going to come. As we're going to, and then we have a historic consultant, and we're going to uh, begin to do a deconstruction of the house. So
Mm,
people might be scared like we're demolishing it once you see some activity happen. But what we're doing is we're categorizing what is salvageable, like even the lap siding on the outside, it'll get marked, like individually marked and carefully and painstakingly taken down through a series of with a historic uh, a construction company, a historic restoration construction company will come in with a huge team, will itemize as much information as much uh, of the existing siding and even plaster on the inside, anything that can be taken out without it disintegrating, right? And then we're going to store it in a warehouse. So it'll get stripped down all the way down to the piers. Then we're going to come back in and rebuild it with the same materials. So it's a wood frame structure. So we're going to come in and do wood frame. They used 2x4s back then. We're probably going to use 2x6s, but it will still keep the same, material. The character of the house will be the same. We're going to come back over with uh, wood siding still. We're not going to use vinyl siding or hardy board. The house right now has vinyl siding that was just a temporary fix. So that would be removed and not replaced. Right. So we're going to build up the floors and then all the way back up to the roof, and then everything was stick frame. So right now we use when we build houses, we use pre-manufactured trusses that come out of a factory on a flatbed truck and then hoisted up by a crew or by a crane. But here we're gonna rebuild each member, and it'll be assembled the same way as close as we can to what was built at that time, because there weren't really pre-manufactured, pre-engineered trusses that were made at this period. So we have to maintain the structural integrity of the original design, and then kind of finish it as best we can to with the same materials on the exterior. So that's yeah, it's gonna take a long time, right? It's not anything that's gonna happen over. The deconstruction will probably take several months. It
wow.
won't take like a week like you see construction projects now where they tear down something and then start building. It's going to take a long time to take it down piece by piece and then build it back up.
And what are
So
you doing with all these individual pieces?
yeah, we're gonna put it in a warehouse, and we'll be able to mark. They'll be individually marked, so we know where they are. They'll be photographed where we took them down, and then they'll be placed in a like an organization within the storage facility, right? And then once it's time for uh, us, the historic consultant, the foundation, and the historic uh, restoration contractor to go in and start pulling out what's salvageable, we'll separate that from the rest and then begin to to apply them back to the house. So even like the window frames you see on the bottom picture,
Yeah.
like they may not obviously go back uh, with the same system with the same materials, but we could still repurpose that window frame and the plate glass and put it along a wall and make it like a art piece or something, right?
Mm.
And where it'll be safe to look at or something. So it'll still have a use, even though it won't be used as a like a operable window. It'll be used as a decorative item inside of the set design. So that's another way we can repurpose
Interesting.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then maybe give a piece like that to the History Center or something. They could have a small exhibit over
Yeah.
there and
Yep.
show some materials. Just don't
Exactly.
do like wood keychains, or maybe do wood keychains. I don't know. You could raise some money that way, like little pieces
Oh
of
yeah,
wood
I
or
guess
something.
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, yeah, they probably have some
Look, you're
fundraising
going to
things that
have
they
a
could
lot of
do. Yeah.
material. I
Yeah.
mean, there's going to be a
Mm-hmm.
lot of go back to that picture of the actual house. I mean, even the chimney, right? Like the chimney
Yeah.
itself,
Right.
that
The
could be a
bricks and
cool
stuff, and
piece. I
people
don't
could
know,
buy a
right?
brick or
You could
something,
buy
right?
something though, right? Like I think the whole goal is to get people to experience it,
Mm-hmm.
this piece of history,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So
Right.
in whatever way you can do that, whether it's getting people to come to the new museum to check it out,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe there could even be museums up in Tennessee that might want that like window piece of art, like
Mm-hmm.
something
Mm-hmm.
like that might be
Yeah.
kind of interesting to share with
Right.
everybody.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because museums do that a lot.
Yeah.
They'll share exhibits, and it is a way of cross promoting what's going on here.
Yeah.
So yeah, that can definitely be possible.
Well, it's like the best case scenario is you could have actually restored it. This isn't even really a restoration. This is a
Yeah,
rebuild.
rebuild, reconstruction. You call it. Mm-hmm. And then we have to use a certain percentage of the existing material to maintain the certification on a national level through the National Register of Historic Places.
What is that percentage?
I'm not sure. I had to talk with the with the historic consultant. I'm trying to shoot for like 60 to 80%, right? But it could be lower than
60 to 80% of the old
structure
material
to be reused. But that's
Whoa.
just what I want to shoot
Now,
for.
how's that
right?
possible looking at this
Well,
picture?
like I'm saying, we're going to reclaim it and then repurpose it, but not use it in the same manner that it is right now.
Got it.
Like we could hang the windows inside and make it decorative art.
Right.
We can use some of the shiplap siding as another piece, another mural. It's things like that we can integrate into the building. So we're going to work with that's going to be their job, is to make sure we're going to keep the certification when we do the reconstruction as much as possible, but they won't be reused in the same manner as they are right now.
It would have been interesting if it was turned into a bed and breakfast. I think it's too late now, but if it, and maybe they had done that. I would assume they kept it in business as long as they could.
Yeah, and they had some people living in there up to the point where it was obviously not habitable.
Yeah.
And so they were trying to obviously keep it funded where it just wasn't a total waste, and then the city would just condemn it and then slate it for demolition. So
That's worst case scenario.
Right.
And then you lose it. And then, again, kind of back to our like Disney World conversation earlier. It's like, man, it's not going to be the same if you had to scrape the whole thing and try to replace it, but not use the right material. It's just not going to feel right. I think this is kind of, this plan that you've explained is like the perfect way forward. Like it's a good mix of rebuilding it, repurposing. It's going to stay the same relative structure. It'll be a museum. People can visit it.
Right. And the first floor, we're going to keep exactly the same walls, exactly the same footprint. The second floor, we may look at altering it a little bit because it has been repurposed over the years. And we could do like a kind of a small stage performing arts area so people can come in and rent out the part of the facility so they can have more of an income generator for the foundation. So we're going to look at that as well on the upper level.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're going to have to find a way to continuously get funded.
Right. Yeah. And you don't want to rely just on like tourism dollars and have $2 or $3 and stuff that people are going to drop in for a tip. You want to have something that people want to say, hey, let's have like a meeting at the Jackson House.
Yeah.
And it might be able to seat like 30 people. It won't seat like 200, but you still could use it in a way that it can renovate. People can, the Jackson Foundation can have a reoccurring profit margin for once it's viable.
There's some notable buildings around town that could have been repurposed, that were torn down, and a new building was built there. Like an example coming up, which we're going to hear more about, and we're actually doing an episode with them, is the Mirasol on Davis Island.
Okay.
So that was built in the 1920s. It was a hotel, and it's been, I think, back and forth where they convert it from a hotel to an apartment, back to a hotel. Now it's an apartment again.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, according to what I understand, it's very hard to make the numbers work as an apartment, meaning you're
Mm.
not generating an appropriate level of income to do a full
Right.
restoration there. Like with these historic properties, you always have to balance those economics,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and you have to create additional income because historic properties take a
Right.
lot of maintenance
Yep.
dollars.
Yep.
And so, yeah, David's got it pulled up here. Just an
Yep.
absolutely gorgeous
Beautiful building, right?
100-year-old
Beautiful,
building.
right?
You feel
Mm-hmm.
like you're in Palm Beach or
Mm-hmm.
something, man. Like, look at how gorgeous the architecture is.
Completely.
You go on the inside, it's got the old Florida Pecky cypress ceilings, and some travertine. It's just an incredible property. And so,
Mm-hmm.
what the new owner wants to do, in order to continue that preservation and spend millions of dollars more on it to try to, redo the windows and make it more resilient to storms,
Mm-hmm.
all those things for
Mm-hmm.
this 100-year-old building, they want to convert it back to a hotel
Okay.
to make it more economical.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would go back to be a boutique hotel and, use those extra dollars to continue to get the proper infrastructure in place. Like,
Right.
I even think, like, after the storm came through, this was built 100 years ago. They weren't thinking about stormwater engineering back then, apparently, or else they would have built Davis Islands like 10 feet higher, right?
Right. Right.
But they had water come into the basement. That's where all the electrical is.
Really? Oh
And
man. There you go.
just because of the way the law and the code and everything works, they weren't allowed to move that electrical outside of the floodplain. They had to spend a bunch of money to like rebuild where it was.
What? Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Hmm.
Yeah. And because it's an
That is.
apartment, because they're not changing the use, it's
Yeah.
just like, hey, you can get the permit to just rebuild
Oh,
it.
I got you. Yeah.
If you wanted to move it, then that opens a whole can of
Mm-hmm.
worms.
Mm-hmm.
His and their kind of whole pitch is, we want to convert this back to a hotel and completely modernize the electrical system,
Right.
modernize the infrastructure
Right.
around it,
Mm-hmm.
so it lasts another
Agree.
100 years.
Exactly.
My fear overall with a lot of these projects, and we're getting ready to talk about Tampa Union
Yeah.
Station,
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
when you don't have that activity,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
when you don't let creative people come in and kind of rethink these historic buildings, decades go by and they get worse and worse and worse. And
Right.
before you know it, the roof collapses, and then it gets bulldozed, and then you don't have it anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And it's a hard kind of juggling match. I mean, to have a facility that is constantly requiring maintenance. I mean, you do have to maintenance these buildings, right? And have a budget. And of course, it's going to grow. The older it gets, the higher the budget, the more expensive it is, the more expensive it is to repair it, because you have to have specialized crews that have the sensitivity and have the construction knowledge to rebuild these things. And that's becoming less and less in our industry. So yeah, I mean, it's a challenge. I sometimes I work with Patrick Montega over at the Cuban Club, and he talks about a lot of funding he has to get to kind of keep that building up. But just think about it, that building wasn't there. I mean, it's so much an icon, right?
It's
To
such an
Ybor. So
icon.
you don't want to lose these things, but you got to have people that are going to value, the legacy that it holds just by being there. And it takes a lot of labor of love, and I know cash flow is important. And it's just like it's one of those things where you go, yeah. I feel for them,
Well,
it's
it's
something we
like
could
you
do.
can't, I guess the whole point, it's not just this building, but this building is a good example because it's kind of next on the radar,
Mm-hmm.
right, of a
Mm-hmm.
project like this. But the whole thing is like, it doesn't make sense financially
Mm-hmm.
from like an underwriting, like the deal, right, perspective, where you keep it as an apartment building, but then you spend, and I think they've already spent a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
doing what they can, but it doesn't make sense to keep it as an apartment and spend millions and millions and millions of dollars on a restoration. You're not getting that money back.
Right.
And unless you just had like a billionaire superhero guy come into Tampa and start like throwing money around, you got to kind of work with the reality with
Mm-hmm.
what you have. And Ebor's, I mean, we could talk
Yeah.
all day,
Oh, yeah.
right? Like Ebor specifically with the Cuban Club. I think Patrick told me they're getting like $2 million
Mm-hmm.
to do some work on the Cuban Club.
Yeah.
I mean, these historic buildings are expensive
Yeah,
to
they
maintain.
are. And you got to have really good grant source people that can go and find that funding that's out there. And he has a good team. We had some people on our nonprofit with Friends Tampa Union Station that found some grant funding. and I actually sit on a Hillsborough County affordable. Well, it's a Hillsborough County Historic Challenge grant that I sit on once a year, and we get money from the state, and we have applicants that have historic buildings. So we're a committee that meets and we assign or match their construction costs. So if they have 50 grand, we'll match another 50 grand.
Wow.
So and then they can piecemeal it. So they can come back year after year until they finish their project. So we can fund as much as we can that's in that pot. So there are sources out there that people can, if they do a lot of digging around, and it takes extra work to do that. But there are sources that you can at least supplement some of the cost and offset some of your out of pocket costs. But something like the hotel is obviously is a whole different level,
Yeah.
than what we deal with on the Hillsborough County Historic Challenge Grant.
The issue with the hotel specifically too is it's not on any list.
Oh yeah, see they got to get it registered,
So,
right? So then
that
can come from
you've
federal
got this
funding.
100-year-old, gorgeous, beautiful architecture,
Mm-hmm.
clearly built with intention, and I think Davis, I'm like, who was the developer of Davis Islands? DP Davis
Yeah,
was his name.
yeah, yeah.
And I think he started in the 1920s, and by the time the crash occurred in 1929, the whole development went under. But clearly built that with some intention, and a lot of these buildings,
visionary,
I think a lot of these buildings, Cuban Club, Tampa Union Station, a lot of them were built with that intention. The architecture is so significant and so far beyond what we build today.
Yeah.
Like if you look at a new government building versus an old one,
You're right.
there's a real significant difference.
Yeah.
And part of the reason probably is because, you tell me it's probably much more expensive to use these, thick bricks.
When you think of the labor costs, when you think of how you had to create these custom molds and then have the crews that have the knowledge to build those things, it's kind of when you harken back to, like I said, older parts of the world where you're looking at North Africa and the Fertile Crescent, Italy, the Renaissance, and looking at old structures that are like 700, 800,000 years old, those churches, Gothic, Romanesque churches. This pulls elements of those structures, of the architecture into Tampa Union Station. It's a neoclassical building, built in 1912, but they still wanted to harken back to that period. So it took like maybe 30 years to build one of those churches, right? With the intricate, doorways, and have all the saints carved out, hand carved. It's a lot of time, a lot of intensity, but obviously today we don't build that way. And then we build more, like I say, for right now, instead of any kind of thing that leads to the future, because you might build a new, say, police station. It looks nice because it's got all the fancy modern motifs and the overhangs and cantilevers. But in a couple of years, it's going to look old. It's going to be outdated.
Yes.
It's a fad. It'll get torn down and rebuilt, right? The Tampa Union Station, 100 plus years old, it'll be that way for another 100 years. And it still
hopefully
has
if you
quality
can get
and beauty, right?
Yes.
Than some of the other buildings. So
Yes. So David, give me that front shot right in the center. And Jerel, you kind of tell me what this is. We talked earlier, it's Tampa's oldest train station, but
right.
Looks like we've got stained glass. This is
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of a cool building here.
Yeah, you see like the stained glass squares that are above the windows, the transom, their transoms. They have the terracotta decorative coins around it. You have your pediment. You got your metopes. Those little dentils and stuff. You have your entablature. And you have your cornice elements. All that is reminiscent of that neoclassical style. You got your Corinthian columns. Everything was borrowed and then put into the architecture of this building. It had your two separate entrances, and obviously, the way the building was made, it I kind of talk about it in the book. It was built on segregation, right? You had your color entry on the left. No, on your color entry, was on the left side, and your whites only was on the right side.
Is that why
So
there's two doors?
Yeah, it's a perfectly symmetrical building.
Wow.
Yeah, and Leitner was an architect. I think the same architect that designed City Hall and some other famous structures around that time in Tampa. But yeah, it still has a beautiful symmetry to it, and but yeah, that's kind of unfortunate that it had some some of the current times of, that was built in the early 1900s, right? So it was a wall that ran down the middle, but and it separated, you know, say ethnicities from each other. So,
Mm.
but it's, all in all, it's still a beautiful building. It's it has some neglect to it. You see, like you got patches of weeds that are sprouting out at the top
Well,
and
it
on the
is. It's hard to
corners.
tell from this photo, and I
Yeah, the
think
windows
this
are deteriorated.
is
Yeah,
6 years old. This photo.
yeah,
It's in bad shape.
yeah.
I mean,
It
I
is.
like we.
Like
I
the
don't.
windows are really bad. They're
Yeah.
falling apart, and they had to go in and put plexiglass to keep it from hurting somebody because they're about to collapse. So the city's gone in and just kind of did a temporary fix to try to hold some of the windows in place. So every time it rains, it flood. Rain gets in through the window system and floods parts of the building.
Wow.
Because the windows are that bad. They're eroded. They're not doing their job right. So they need to totally get replaced. That's a major part of our scope is rebuilding these windows and using as much material as we can, and then repurposing it with modern material that's more durable. So we're not going to put in
Mm.
some of the same, pine. We're going to put in an engineered, denser, longer lasting wood product that has been approved in historic applications. That's going to get put in place of the wood here in the windows.
So for these windows, I mean, the example where you've got plexiglass up against the window to stop the rain and the wind from
Hmm.
coming in. What
Hmm.
if a hurricane came? Wouldn't that blow right through
Oh
that?
yeah, yeah.
Damn.
It's been fortunate, just like the Jackson House, where it's been fortunate that it's just a little bit of maintenance and fortuitousness that's kind of kept it up.
Just keeping it
Yeah.
above the surface,
Hmm.
like never really
Hmm.
doing what needs to be done. But it sounds
Right.
like that's where we are now. Now you've so again,
Right.
you've been selected
Hmm.
as the architect
Architect.
of record.
Right. Right.
And you are also on the Friends of Tampa
Tampa
Union
Union Station.
Station board,
Yes.
which is the nonprofit that runs
Hmm.
Tampa Union Station,
Right.
and it's and the building is owned by the city.
Owned by the city. Yeah, and we're a nonprofit arm that we hold fundraisers and gatherings in order to raise money to help fix or stop gaps
Mm.
before we get major funding that can be distributed through the city and through CRA and CAC grants and stuff that helps downtown partnership and everything that can contribute money to major items that need repair.
Is
So
this
we've
in
been
the
doing it.
CRA?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's in a downtown CRA.
Okay,
So it's been appropriated some money to
nice,
help with the restoration.
man. So is the money ready to fix this thing?
Yeah, yeah, it's already in place. The contractor's already been on site for some time now, and we've got the modulars set up over to the north side. We're gonna start doing we talked about earlier the termites damage is extensive. That's gonna get remediated, tenant, hopefully in the next month or two. Then you'll start seeing some major activity go on.
There's a few different ideas. You said like have a some sort of an office space upstairs.
Right. Yeah. It's a 2-story building. You have your atrium space in the middle where the double doors are. Then the sides, the north and side, are flanked with 2-story floor plates. So you have office spaces that the city did use years ago, but now they've been vacant. So we're going to find a way where it can be leased out and used by some whoever business owner, private business owner that can come in and use that space. It could be like another kind of co-working space. Like I mentioned, we want to put a cafe on the first level.
Yeah,
So it can be one of those incubator spaces where somebody might want to just rent a desk for a day or something
like a
and come
co-work
in.
space.
Yeah, so like what they do at Armature Works, how they have a little
Right.
upstairs area. Not Armature Works. Well, Armature has one too, but Oxford Exchange has the kind of area as well. So we can do the same thing at Tampa Union Station. So how awesome is that? You can go in and go into the beautiful, atrium space, go up to your co-working space, go down, have a coffee or something, and then you head back, to where your destination is. It's centrally located. So it's right next to, obviously, you can get onto the crosstown fairly quickly. It's close to downtown. If you got to go to the central business district, it's a nice location that can be open for a lot of different possibilities other than just going there to take the train.
I'm trying to think of other areas around the country. Like there's so many, even big cities, right? Like we talked about Denver Union Station.
Mm-hmm.
They've done a cool job of taking their old train station, and it's like this cafe and restaurant. It's much bigger than Tampa Union Station.
Yeah.
But I found, so someone posted this on one of those like Tampa history groups.
Yeah.
I wish I could shout out the person it was. But this is from, I think, the 80s or 70s. This is a article from the Tampa Tribune.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Union Station plan. Consultant's drawing shows how Tampa's renovated Union Station might appear with a 7-story office building as its immediate neighbor. Whoa. Under the plan, Amtrak would use a portion of the station while other areas would be used for restaurants, cafes, and offices. So this idea where you could repurpose Tampa Union Station is not brand new.
Right.
This has been talked about for decades.
Mm-hmm.
I would love personally to see that old historic building. Like, have you've been to Charleston, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right.
Holy man, some of those old buildings that they've repurposed into restaurants.
Yes.
Like there's this one called like, I think it's a cathedral. It might be called Cathedral or the church or something like that. But you walk into this old church and the whole freaking restaurant is inside of this church with these cathedral ceilings and stained glass.
Right.
It's the coolest thing
Corner
ever.
vaults and everything. Yeah.
What if this old building was a restaurant, cafe, co-work, and then a train station, real train station that Amtrak could use, whatever, was built kind of behind it, just like described here. To me, that's like the master plan of what would be probably the most advantageous.
It's a lot of possibilities, because that's what we want to do as the nonprofit. We want to make this station more active than just ridership, right? So we do want to have all that in there. Maybe restaurant, cafe. We restored the baggage building. That's the little corner, the L shape in the corner there. That was restored, and it can be leased out as an event space, so people can have like art shows or, birthday parties or graduations or something in that space. So we have an event space that's there. There's another building that's further in the back that we may try to see if we can use it as an artist gallery or something. So there's things that we're trying to think about how we can get more people to come in and experience the space and make something beautiful. Like, that'll be awesome if we could do something like that.
So thanks, David, for finding it.
That's beautiful.
Church and Union in Charleston. So they've just taken this old church and they've totally repurposed it, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And it's the Southern food and the shrimp and grits and these Southern dishes, and it's what an experience. And there's no reason why Tampa Union Station couldn't have that same thing. Oh, yeah. Like, I'd put like the goody, like bring the goody back and put it in there,
I was
right?
sad that went away.
Now we're talking about two different things, right? Because there's two jobs you've got. One of them is you're on the board of Friends of Tampa Union Station.
Right.
And that's where you're thinking ambitiously about activating the building.
Exactly.
Then the other hat you wear is this restoration project, which is not considering.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like step one, restore it. And then, hey, let's try to figure out what we can do here.
Yeah, and then, of course, that's going to come with more funding that is not in the pot for the restoration. So we're working underneath a scope of work is to sort of rebuild those elements of the building that have been not been falling apart the past 30 years, right, since the last major renovation. So that's the only scope we have to do as architect of record, and working with the contractor is to bring up those areas that have been falling apart. We're going to restore the bathrooms in there, because when you go in there, they're like high 80s, really bad, like the bright, obscure colors and laminate, and it's horrible. So we're going to actually remodel that whole area, that whole corner of the building, and then put in materials that harken back to the 1900s. So we're going to have the period lighting aesthetic on it. It's not going to be like a fluorescent light strip that's hanging in there right
floors.
Now. Yeah, we have coins. We're going to put in there and medallions. We're going to put on the wall. A nice paint scheme. We're going to have like panel doors, like the historic. So you got the historic 5-6 panel doors there. We're going to mimic that into the toilet partitions. We're not going to have that plastic laminate stuff in there. We're gonna rip all that out. So we're gonna restore those areas to fall more in line with the aesthetic of the train station.
Oh
So
wow.
that's gonna be really nice.
So it's gonna look the exact same, but you're gonna see less paint chips, less issues with the brick and the mortar, and
Yeah, and all this right here, like you can see, right? That's an older picture. I'm surprised how you got a picture of that
what
up.
is this? 2012? Is that what it says? 2012?
That's an
Wow.
older because right now we have plywood that's holding up all the framing up there. You can't even see the framing. It's just plywood that's been nailed
Oh,
together,
jeez.
and it's all that's gonna go away. They were gonna sandblast all the iron work that's there, and then give it a clean, take away the rust, and then recoat it. So that's
Wow.
all gonna be in the scope there. So
And what's so if give me that top down, David. That's a great view to kind of rethink the site.
hmm
Show me a little more. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And go a teeny bit north, David. Let me see the corner down here though. Let me see the whole block. Thank you, David. My bad, dude. Jesus, we got it set up. Okay. So Tampa Union Station, the old building we're talking about, is you see the white TPO
hmm
roof right
hmm
there.
hmm
That's a very small portion of this overall property.
hmm
Have you, personally with your architect hat on, or even
hmm
with your board member, right, of Friends of Union Station hat on, have you guys thought about like this is a lot of room? Can
hmm
you expand train operations on that north side and keep the building for the cafe, restaurant, co-work space?
It's Yeah, that's kind of what we thought about. That's the building up to the corner there and in the top. That's where we want to try to do something with that and
That
have
one?
like and
Okay.
have like an artist studio in there and have some other kind of spaces that we can lease out. And it's a weird ownership because Amtrak operates, right, but then they own the lines, and CDX owns the right of way. So you've got all these overlapping agencies that are all working in this whole lot. So the city, this is one big parcel, but then they if they want to if Amtrak wants to add in a line, they work with CDX and then they can make it happen and they can actually take up some real estate. So it's a weird negotiating thing where you've got this entity and everybody kind of leases from each other and stuff, and it kind of limits what you can do on the outside area. And when there's trains that come in, that parking lot right there is full.
This
So,
this parking lot right here on that
right.
north side.
And we want to try to take some of the spaces that aren't finished, like you see the dirt area there, and there's a space in the back that has like a little shed. We want to make it like kind of to have outdoor events. So
Very
we want
cool.
to do that in those places that aren't being used.
Wow. It's such a critical spot in the urban core. Like,
Yeah.
did David zoom out? I mean, this thing's smack dab in the
hmm
center.
Yeah.
Ybor,
And you see
Channelside,
where,
downtown Encore. Like, look at you are
right. I was gonna say it's
directly in
centrally
the center.
located. And
So it's kind of cool that you guys are rethinking what this could be. Adding these different activations could really be significant when everything around it starts to grow and develop.
yeah, and
Like, it could be
yeah,
a really cool little
nice
little
an
spot.
event venue, right?
Yeah.
And you don't really have anything like that in that part of downtown that people can go and be in and out, fairly quickly. You're not further down where you got a lot of traffic congestion and stoplights, and then you're trying to get down to the arena, but you're on the periphery, so you can be in and out. You're in Ybor fairly quickly. It's a nice central location. Even if they want to plan for like another like a high speed rail or something that's coming in, it would be a nice addition to have a stop right there at Tampa Union Station.
Oh, it should stop nowhere else,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah,
I mean, Tampa Union
right.
Station, that is our main train terminal. It's
hmm
right in the center of the
Right.
city. And if we're going to grow and develop, not even with what I think will happen, just the projects we've talked about on the show,
hmm
like you're going to need some sort of a central train terminal to bring people in and out
Right.
in an efficient manner,
Right.
regardless of the interstate system and how that grows. So it's like, that's where Brightline
So
should go,
yeah,
Tampa Union
right.
Station. I
Yeah.
think the challenge with that is how do you get the trains in and out without kind of messing through Ybor, can you shift the line?
Right.
There's some
And
different
then,
options. How do you get it?
yeah,
With Brightline,
right,
Brightline's supposed to go down I-4.
right,
Well, how do you get it from I-4 down to the line that can? So
right.
there's some challenges, but damn, all this stuff is worth doing the right
Hmm.
way.
Yeah, yeah. And you got to
Instead
get all
of
those agencies together,
yeah.
right?
Well,
Yeah, that's going to be the
is
challenge,
that
right?
the greatest issue in all this? Like, in order for you to do anything, you've got these federal agencies to
Hmm.
deal with
Hmm.
that are probably not going to like anything but status quo.
Yeah,
They like their process.
yeah.
And so if you try to bring up that old Tampa Tribune article and you're like, hey, this is what we want to do, they're going to be like, yeah,
Yeah, no.
no.
We sit on it for like 10 years until the dream dies. But yeah, like it would be nice to have, like something like Brightline to come in and stop. And I know the president of Brandy, the president of Friends of Tampa Union Station, she wants to advocate for that. And it would be, but then we got to get past those agencies because, CDX, if they're not going to have some signed agreement where they can modify the rails to allow their trains to fit on it, or
Mm.
they don't want to use their, it's something like that can kill that whole deal, you know.
Yeah, there's like the business of it, but then also kind of the politics of it
Hmm.
too.
Hmm.
And so what's the time frame on it getting started?
We've been in a preparation mode for the past couple of months, and we want to have a timeline of about a year start to finish to have everything remediated and then to start doing some of the demolition. Those are the high class restrooms that are going to get put in
Love
there.
it. Hell yeah, man.
So yeah, I mean it's gonna have a, a nice beautiful look to it. We're gonna go in and remove all the peeling uh, stucco and dilapidated areas of the interior finishes. We're going to upgrade electrical, mechanical systems in there to get them flowing correctly.
Mm.
Redo that canopy out there in the back. Of course, the restrooms, and then tuck and point the brick, reseal it, recoat it to give it more durability and longevity for water intrusion and infiltration. Those some of the are submitted. We're working with the contractor to have more elegant, restroom partitions in there. So yeah, it's gonna be a nice, you know, um, finished product. So we're looking at about a year.
A year.
Hmm.
And the first step is the tenting, right?
Yes,
So that'll kick
yes.
off what, early next year?
Well, I'm hoping that they can get that done before the end of the year.
Try talking to the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, hopefully we can get that done before the end of the year, like November, December. So that's going to be something that I want to try to press on. So,
Hell yeah.
of course, with December, everything shuts down. You only got 2 weeks and everybody's on family vacation.
Santa's coming. I'm out of here. Yeah, and like go back, David, to that picture of the room where you could see the freaking mold in the
Oh,
paint
yeah.
peeling. Now there's water intrusion behind those
Yeah.
walls. I'm just glad it's happening because man, if you let that stuff slide,
Yeah.
you could have a collapse.
It's more
more
money,
likely every day, right? That's
more
something.
intensive repair work. Yes.
Yep. So it's good to know it's all moving forward. So tell people how they can help with Tampa Union Station
Oh,
and the
yeah.
Jackson House. Is there a way to donate, get involved? How does the community help you with these two projects?
Yeah. The good thing about it, there's obviously different nonprofit arms. One with the Jackson House, the Jackson Foundation, and they have the website, and they can go in. You could become a member, and would they want to increase their membership, and then they don't really have like a scale of donation. You could donate whatever you want to. You can come and get involved and just donate your time, and that would be something that they would really be appreciative of.
JacksonHouseFoundation.org.
Hmm.
They've got a whole website here, about us, gift shop, donate, volunteer, all the information's
Right.
there. And then
Right.
Tampa Union Station.
And Tampa Union Station, that's Friends of Tampa Union Station. We just had a remodeled website that went live about a year ago, so it has a lot of interactive information on there.
Hell yeah.
And we do a campaign called Buy a Brick, where you can get your name, of course, cut and etched into a brick and then put into one of the sidewalks that lead to the Tampa Union Station. They should have an image in there somewhere. That's really been a popular way that people want to leave their legacy with the train station. and we do have that's okay. I guess we're in there without images, but
It's probably
yeah,
loading.
okay.
I
Yeah, so
love the logo you guys did,
oh
man.
yeah.
Do you guys have any
Yeah.
merch? I'm about to buy a
Oh
t-shirt
yeah.
if you
Yeah,
do.
there's a link on there. We got hats, shirts,
We'll
coffee
order.
mugs. It's
Oh,
all in
really?
there. Yeah.
Okay,
It
we're gonna
should be
order
on
some
there
stuff.
somewhere like
And all the, the money that, you guys get from the merchandise and the memberships and all that goes
right.
towards the fund, which helps preserve
Right.
the Tampa Union
Right, because we're
Station.
all volunteers. Nobody gets paid a salary. We just do it, and we meet periodically,
Oh,
and
dude.
we do not take a salary or a cut or anything. It's just all our donated time.
Wow, David's got the mugs pulled up. They're pretty
Oh, they
dope.
yeah yeah
What do we got here? We got
yeah. We got
mugs, t-shirts, tote bag. Oh yeah,
they don't have me
my
modeling
wife's
my
about
shirt.
to come home
I
with
like
a
the
new.
old school one at the bottom with the rings. The blue ring, the shirt right there. That's my favorite right
Yeah, I like that
there.
too. You got the
The
hoodie.
old school, yeah.
You got it
So
all.
yeah, mugs, hats.
Amazing. Oh, and look, an
Look
infant
at that. See,
bodysuit. I
that's
can put
new. I
one on
have
my
not seen
baby. They
that.
got a
Look at that. Perfect.
dog.
Yeah.
You guys got it all, man. I love it. So you can order that directly on the website. And what's the name of the
Right.
website, David? TampaUnionStation.com.
Yeah.
Nice. Beautiful. And then Jerel McCants' book,
Yeah.
Architecture of Segregation. When did
Yes,
you write
sir.
this? You wrote this a few years ago, you said?
Yeah. Well, it took me 10 years to make it. So it was released last year, a year ago, in October of 2024. Yeah. So that was something that was, of course, when I'm working and doing everything else, I wanted to write a book and tell this story. Yeah.
It's easier to write a book when you live it. It's like
Yeah.
this was probably your thoughts,
Yeah.
you've had
Yeah. And it
throughout
was,
your career.
yeah, throughout my childhood and throughout my travels. And it, like I said, it kind of grew organically. It was something that was inspired based on those stories my dad told me growing up as a child in the deep South. And then me going to college and meeting some friends from other countries. And I was fortunate enough to be a student exchange when I was in high school to Soviet Union when it was still, heavily communist, and that was like a warming of relations. They had this student transfer program that was going on, so that exposed me at an early age to see how different cultures lived and interacted, and it just kind of something that grew out of my travels. I've been to man like 30 so countries and studied abroad and spent extended time and had friends from different parts of the world I'm still friends with now, and understanding their journey and what they experienced and what their community experienced. It all came together into this book, and I wanted to kind of do this because when I have interns coming to the office, and I do talk to kids, high school students about architecture because it's something that doesn't pop immediately in people's heads, right? And everybody's like, "What's an architect? Why do you want to be an architect?" And it's like you're either born into it or you're not, right? And it's something that if you don't do it, it's a part of you that's missing. So, and some people may want to be an architect but not ever exposed to it. So it was something that I knew I wanted to do at an early age. So I'm an advocate to kind of get people to understand and the beauty and the honor of being in a profession like this. Is it may not be the highest paying, but it's very self-rewarding, self-fulfilling, and it, like I said, it gives you a purpose, and you get to share your vision to the world. You're creating stuff from thin air, from your memory, and making something physical out of it. I don't think of can't think of any too many professions that can do something like that, where we house where people
Mm.
do their jobs. So it to me it's like you're giving yourself every time a project is done and built. That's something that you gave to the world.
Yeah,
it's,
man.
it's something. Yeah, it's very beautiful, passionate profession. So yeah, I mean the book kind of came out of that, and I wanted people to educate uh, things that I've saw traveling different countries and understanding different cultures and ethnicities and how they interacted, and pull out different principles and be like a lesson learned of how we can rethink the way we design spaces, not for now, but into the future. So that's what the subtitle is: the hierarchy of spaces and places.
Well, I can't wait to dig in. Skimming through it, I noticed you're pulling cultures all over the world and all over
Right.
time.
Yeah.
You're pulling in like ancient Greece,
Yeah.
what the Romans built.
Yep. Yeah.
You've got like Mayan temples in there and stuff you talk about,
Yeah.
like all the different ways people have lived in their communities
Hmm.
throughout history
Yeah. And it's
and how it's applicable
fascinating, right?
today. It is
Yeah.
fascinating.
So
Yeah.
you think about it, and it's like all those civilizations, they had a purpose, they had a mindset of creating this community, and they're all different, and they have this nuances, and there's a connectivity throughout all parts of the world, different parts of time that is common, is a common thread, and that's what I'm trying to present. So I'm creating different arguments and presenting topics of people, how we can create in those communities that we strive for, that we still harken back to and admire, and then try to see if it's something that we can pull from to create and inspire future generations.
Hmm.
So that's where I end the book up. So it's like it's something that is, I think, is lacking in the school system, where it's too formulaic, right? You got to do your core curriculum, you get your credits, and then you leave, but then you don't have a sense of like what direction you want to take when you're in this profession. So I'm just giving people an option. It's like, if you understand the history of mankind and civilization as we know it, uh, this is something that you can begin to create the next couple of years, 100 years, in the future.
Yeah. Spark that true creativity.
Hmm.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier, how the codes are followed too
Hmm.
much to a T,
Right.
and you end up with something that feels inorganic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Very fabricated. Yeah. And it needs to be a loosening of that. And there's other books out there that kind of talk about that as well. And I reference where there's a ways that we can work around those common issues that you see once plans get through permitting, because it always is. Sometimes it can be a roadblock, and sometimes it can be something done for good. It depends on who's on the other side, right? And everybody's working in unison. The architect and the contractor, we can work together to create beautiful, spaces and places, and then permitting didn't always have to be an obstacle. It could
Mm.
it could actually help enhance and make sure that everything's done in accordance with standards. That's what their goal is, right? So
We got to have a whole other podcast on that part of it, how permits could help. It seems like that's the biggest pinch point,
yeah.
with that people complain about.
Hmm.
They message me all the time
Yeah.
about I'm having trouble here and there. But well, again, we talked a lot about sort of the history of growth and development, especially in America, but it's like, that's what we've done with everything, where what started out as good policy,
Hmm.
like, back in the day in the 1800s and early 20th century, there were fires all the time.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
Great Fire of Ybor
Yeah.
City and the
Right.
Fire of West Tampa, the Great Chicago Fire.
Yeah,
Like, you
right.
hear it was all
Right.
over. And so a lot of these rules were put in place for fire
Hmm.
code and for
Hmm.
safety and for standard building practices. And like, that's
Right.
all comes from good policy making.
Yeah.
But the problem is it's been overinflated
It
by
goes too
a
far.
100 years.
Yeah.
And now it's wrapped up in this red tape
Yeah.
bow.
You have the bureaucracy, and it, it's good intentions. And some people say the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? So we ended up in this halfway spot of where we started out with something good, and then too many hands get put in there, and too many people have their own way of doing things. And something that I tell clients is that when you start a project, even we do a residential project, it's not just me that's gonna really have their hands like working on your project, and in my staff, right? It's gonna be my staff. It's gonna be probably 10 to 20 other people that you'll never see that's gonna look at your project and have some kind of comment. So before it gets from us to permitting to the contractor, you we got to go through all these different hurdles that we don't even want to have to, go back and forth with the client about. So if we can minimize that and make it that process as smooth as possible, that's what our goal is. But they need to understand that, what you can't. It's hard to get 20 people to agree on anything. You put them in
Right.
a room and they're looking at one set of plans. You're gonna have comments. You're gonna have issues. Then everybody's gonna have their different way of how they think it should be solved, and that's where the bottleneck happens. So again, you have good intentions, but then you got too many hands in the pot, right? And it creates this bad batch. And it's like, how do you go back to streamlining and go back to those 4 or 5 things that was the original issue to try to make safer communities?
AI. That's what they're saying now, AI.
I've heard that.
I think
They're testing models.
there's sort of merit
Yeah.
to having some sort of a program, but the issue I have with AI is if it's just binary, meaning if the AI just takes your plans and applies it to the code and says, "Oh no, that doesn't work." Nope.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we have now. So I
Yeah.
don't think that fixes anything. It's
Right.
almost like you need AI to be more
Intuitive. Yeah.
intuitive and like creative and use
It's funny.
context in a deeper way.
I've thought about, obviously have endless nights when I've with a project that's been permitting for 6 months and I don't know why. I'm like, what is the issue other than personality? I think some of the things can be handled where it's a level of importance. So if you have a small project, you pay a fee, get the permit. Let the architect and the contractor work out the issues with the inspector on the field. Small hurdle, right? If you have a mid-sized project, you pay a fee, have one review, and you're done. And not pay a fee, have a review, another review, another review, another review, another review. This got to go up the ladder. Like, what is this? Like, have your checklist, pay your fee, because it's really just based on fee generation and taxes, right? Because the city wants to get their cut if you're doing a development project. I'm fine with that. Pay the fee, get the permit, let the architect and the contractor and the inspectors work it out in construction.
Right.
So at least you're in the construction process and not held up because of interpretations. That, as I think, is the problem. We need to reduce that and only make permitting a fee and then get the permit. Then we work it out because we're the architects of record. We have the liability. We have the understanding of the true intent of the project. The contractor has an understanding of how to build it. We work together anyway once the project breaks ground. But if it gets in that interstitial space where you got third or fourth or fifth or sixth or 20th party in there that's got their say, that's where things fall apart.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the worst scenario is do the design, get the pay the fee, get the permit, build it, and then, oh no, you know what? This is wrong. You gotta change this part of it. That story's been told on the show too.
Right.
So if you guys want to order the book, the website is JMcCants, JMCCANTS.com/book, and you can buy a copy online. Do you talk about any sort of government code or permit reform in the book?
Yeah. I hit on different topics, and then I fast forward, obviously, from ancient civilizations and how they built back then until the current issues now. So I do talk about codes when it comes to creating spaces that can be more equitable in terms of not separating people based on income and creating rich communities and poor communities. So the book, I dig into the codes when it talks about that kind of issue, not dealing with permitting,
Sure.
but I'm kind of staying with the topic of how to foster true community. You can live with people that you disagree with each other and you disagree their ideology, but you can still agree that you want to create a better, environment or better community for your kids and grandkids.
Right.
So when people can talk to each other that have different social economic status, different rules of thought, then that is what community is. It's not everybody being in unison all the time, but as long as we build based on price and based on putting people here and putting people there, we're going to always be a fractured society.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I talk about in the book. And I talk about other examples of how architects and how other cultures have been in different parts of the world have been able to fuse those notions and harken back to communities that were used to be back in those ancient times.
And what's interesting too is America is a unique case.
Mm-hmm.
I've been fortunate also to travel to a few different countries around the world, and Africa, South America, Europe, Asia, and there's a lot of similarities around the world and cities. Maybe the architecture is different, and maybe their statues and their gods and the way of life is different. But there's these foundational things that exist in every city on earth in all these different areas that don't exist in America. Like one example is like the full block apartment building we talked about for
Mhm.
a half hour today,
Mhm.
right? Or
Mhm. Mhm.
longer. It's
Mhm.
like other places around the world don't do that. Now there's newer areas of these cities around the world, sure, that have that. But like
Yeah.
in general, when you travel around the world, it's set up in a completely different way.
Mhm.
And we in America, our cities used to be like that too. We used to have
Mhm.
50 miles of streetcar
Mhm.
track,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
we used to have these things that I think as more people move back to the city kind of crave because
Mhm.
they see the foundation, they see the fabric
Right.
in the streets, they
Right.
see the old photos and they're
Mhm.
like, shit, why don't we have that back?
Right. And I talk about, and when I further along in the book, that was the rise of the gated community, which started out in California and kind of, went rampant from the West Coast to the East Coast. And people was like, gated communities, we're like live in this secluded environment, and I got to go through past a guard and a gate booth that opens up this thing. It's like, what is that? Is that like prison? You keep people in and keep people out? That's that to me was a destructive development pattern.
Mhm.
And it created a lot of sprawl and what we see in parts of Florida when we go to
Big
down
time.
to like Gibsonton area and Brandon, where you go down this long circuitous street and you got this one road that leads this one gated community, and it's the same thing, and everybody empties out and drives in one direction. Actually, kind of have a comical part in the book where I talk about Edward Scissorhands. I don't know if you remember that movie
Yeah.
with Johnny
Classic
Depp,
Florida
where
flick.
everybody walks out of these colored pastel houses, gets in the car at the same time, and then drives through that little suburbia. That to me was a destructive way to create or to try to enhance what we had as community.
Well, was and is.
Yeah, yeah,
So I mean, you go down to Waimama,
yeah,
right? Or like Parrish,
yeah,
Florida. The
yeah, yeah,
last
right,
thing, you know what I'm not thinking when I'm driving through there? We should build 10,000 homes out here. I
right,
mean, these are small little Florida
yeah,
little towns.
yeah,
And
right,
you don't have infrastructure capabilities to handle that many
right,
homes. Like in the Business Journal, 5,000 new homes proposed. If 2 or 3 people live in each of those homes, you're going to put 10 or 15,000 more people. Everybody has their own car.
yeah,
Now what do you need? Well, now you
yeah,
need roads and highways. You
yeah,
need commercial.
yeah, yeah,
Well, where do we get it? Well, we got to bulldoze the pastures and the cow fields and the
right.
orange groves. And it's like,
You create
man,
this
every
generic,
day
yeah,
we're losing Florida
right. No
to the
trees,
suburban development.
right.
It's like shocking. I mean, since
Mm-hmm.
you've been here and
Yeah.
throughout my
Mm-hmm.
lifetime, traveling up and down Interstate 75, holy shit, man, it's like all one city now.
Yeah.
When does it end? It's
Yeah.
absolutely not sustainable.
Right. Yeah. And it's a bad way to develop, and people looking at solely for profit, right? And like, how many houses can I put over here? And it's creating these I call these desert heat islands, and it's
Mm,
like you get all this hardscape with these roofs, and all the houses are 7 feet apart. When I grew up in a neighborhood, our closest neighbor was about, we had huge yards. It was at least about 30, 40 feet before the next house.
right.
But now you got a house 7 foot. You got your right of way. I mean, your property line. You got 3 foot on one side, 3 foot on the other. You got another house. It's like, I don't want to live that way. You open up a window 7 feet away, you got another window. It's like, what is that?
That's like my neighborhood, but I've lived in the city, so that I
Yeah,
expect
which you
that.
expect, yeah,
But
in an urban sense, yes.
that's what's crazy too, is like in these suburban and frankly like rural communities out east in
Mm-hmm.
Hillsborough County and other counties around Florida,
Mm-hmm.
they're building the single block apartment
Yeah,
complexes.
yeah,
So even beyond like a 7 foot width between homes,
yeah,
how about like a 400 unit apartment complex with no commercial use,
yeah,
with one entrance and exit?
yeah, yeah.
It's like, guys,
One big
I
retirement
get
community.
it.
Yeah,
A lot of people move here. We need the
right.
supply.
Yeah,
But at some point, we're going to have to stop tearing out the orange groves
yeah.
and preserve some of this land. It's just not sustainable.
It's not. It's not.
And when you put all the homes out there, now how do you get the people in the city? This is where the jobs are. This is
Mm-hmm.
where the hockey games are. This is where
Right.
Taylor Swift comes.
Yep.
So how do you get the freaking
You don't have any
hundreds
transit.
of thousands
Yep.
of people into the
Right.
city? It's, I think, you might even see in the next gubernatorial election that conversation be brought up like never before. Like the development
That'd be
question,
good.
that suburban development question.
Mm-hmm.
Like you see a lot of social media pages attacking like FWC,
Mm-hmm.
and some of these, like, I would just say these almost like environmentalists or Florida influencers that advocate for no suburban, stop
Mhm.
overdeveloping, right?
Mhm.
Stop developing Florida.
Mhm. Mhm.
Those pages and those conversations are more popular than ever.
Yeah.
And I hope that conversation comes up in the next Florida state election, because you
It
at
should
some
be,
point
yeah.
you got to have the conversation of, well, when is enough enough?
Right.
Like,
And it's kind of like resiliency. Like, we already have this issue with the peninsula of Florida and with stronger storms and creating all these issues along the perimeters. And it's partly because of, global warming and the change, environmental change that's happening because we're not balancing nature with development, and we're developing in Florida in a way that, like I said, is not sustainable, and it's not creating that giving Florida, the nature of Florida, to recharge. Because when we create a community, we're taking something that was not there and we're putting it there. Then we're creating something different. Then we're offsetting what was there, and they're not giving it some other place to go. It's not just wildlife. We're talking about flora, fauna. We're talking about uh, groundwater, uh, surfacing. You've got aquifers that's getting dried up. You have to develop in a certain way that has the resiliency that can sustain the peninsula long term. So it should be, a question, that can be constantly brought up, during the next elections and stuff. So yeah, it's very important.
well, good luck getting people to come to Florida and come visit if we lose our environment,
Yeah,
and our
exactly.
beaches and all the beautiful stuff, the weather, right? It's like all of that's connected.
Yeah,
You can overdevelop a place and kind of ruin some of
right,
the flora and
right,
fauna, like you said, like the
right.
burrowing owl. Did you
Yeah,
ever read
yeah.
that book Hoot?
No.
Remember that? I think it was like required
Hoot.
reading in Florida. It was
Okay.
basically about development, bulldozing forests and fields and
Hmm.
threatening the burrowing owl.
Oh
Have you heard
wow.
of a burrowing owl?
No,
They're
no.
amazing. They're these little owls. They're like 8 or 10 inches tall, maybe even smaller, but they're
Hmm.
little owls that live in caves underground.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. And they're
Yeah.
native to Florida,
They're
huh?
native to Florida,
Hmm.
and I've seen them in real life. When I was a kid, my dad had a hunting lease up in Pasco County,
Hmm.
and there was burrowing owls on the property.
Wow.
And you'd
Wow.
see these like little owls coming out of these little holes, these little caves in the ground. It's the coolest thing ever. But man, you look at the growth in Florida, and you got to imagine that wildlife has been
Hmm.
threatened.
Hmm.
Even though they say, okay, we're going to preserve this area, and we do, they do the wetland banking, and they do the
Yeah.
land trades, right? But
And it gets
you,
into more regulations, right? Which can be good and bad,
yes,
right? So then you got to
yes,
juggle with that because we got our EPC, and I go through all of my wetland delineations and stuff, and we got to go to the state and then go back to the county and then go to the city. So there are safeguards they're trying to put in place,
sure,
but then of course you become overregulated. I'm an architect, I'm pro development, but I'm pro responsible, sustainable development done in a way that can be done in harmony, and it takes a little bit more intentionality and more purpose into what you're doing, and the result's going to be different, but you'll still achieve a result, and the result is going to be something that's going to be more durable and long lasting.
yeah.
That's what I think we can do on the design side.
Especially with these two projects in particular, right?
Yeah.
Jackson House and Tampa Union Station.
Yeah,
Like those
yeah.
two projects
Maintain
are,
the history, the legacy, the importance of it, and give people more of a sense of place. When they come here, they have those icons there, and they need to be
yeah,
there to facilitate and help grow and expand what Tampa is outside of the community. Outside of states and visitors, they can come here instead of just jumping on a cruise line and seeing cigar rollers, which is
yeah,
nice.
right.
You got other things you can see here too.
Let's rebuild the city before we put 10,000 homes in Waimama, right? How about that?
Right.
Gerald, thank you
Right.
so much for being here today.
No, thank
This was a
you. I
lot of fun.
appreciate it. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Good
man.
talking to you.
Just lastly, real quick, I noticed you have a personal website, probably has your book on it and other
Oh yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
I shouted out earlier, but one more time, what
yeah,
is it?
yeah. It's www.jmccants.com. You can easily just type Jerel McCants in your search engine because nobody has my name. I'm unique in the world, so I'm easy to be found.
Beautiful. And then are you on social at all? People can
Yeah,
follow you?
yeah.
Okay.
Same thing. Just type Jerel McCants on Instagram, Facebook, everything else. So at LinkedIn, we're available, and definitely. I speak at different colleges and high schools. I still do that now, and yeah. So anybody wants to talk about subjects in my book, or even just kind of learn about architecture, I'm always open to meet with people and tell them the beauty of what we do in our profession.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Bye, everybody. See you next week.